Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com, on Roku, Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let's talk about the fight taking place in just a few hours. It's Scott Quigg who's a favorite. Understand, Kiko Martinez is a greater than 3-1 underdog against Kiko Martinez. Now, Kiko Martinez has given some interviews recently where he talks about how he feels he's the stronger fighter and how he feels he's the better boxer. Now, folks, if you just glance at his fights against Calzaghe, for example, you're going to notice that Kiko Martinez, when he feels confident, he's on his front foot. He's coming forward. He's going to come forward on Scott Quigg. Now, the question for Scott Quigg supporters out there is, how does Scott Quigg handle a guy who's hyper-aggressive, throwing volume on his front foot? Is Scott Quigg the kind of guy who can tie you up? Does he clinch you? Is he, let's say, like Vladimir Klitschko? You're on your front foot. Let's say you're Alexander Povetkin. You're trying to crowd the guy. Is he the kind of guy who can just take a step forward and tie you up? Is he a hugger? Does he know how to clinch? Right? If he doesn't, then let's ask a further question. Is he a Floyd Mayweather? Can he turn to the side and keep you on his shoulder? Right? Have the angle set up where, as you're trying to come forward, he keeps turning and he's able to keep you on his shoulder. Right? If he's not Klitschko, or if he's not Mayweather, if he's a guy who uses his feet for defense, if he's a guy who doesn't even like to hang around the pocket, if he's a guy who backs up and is looking for openings, is looking for air to breathe, then Quigg, the big favorite here, is going to have all kinds of problems. Right? The key part of their encounter is going to be the first few seconds of their encounter. Right? Kiko Martinez is going to be the lead. He's not going to wait. He's going to come forward. The idea is going to be, Scott Quigg, what are you going to do? Right? If Scott Quigg can't tie him up, if he can't stay in the pocket, keep him on his shoulder and still operate, then you're going to have a bad visual for the judges. You're going to have the taller man trying to back away from a shorter man who's trying to hunt him down. Right? Now, let me disagree with Kiko Martinez. I think Scott Quigg is a puncher. No question about it to me. But is he the kind of puncher who can hit a guy crowding him? Or does he need room to throw the bombs? If he needs room to throw the bombs, he better catch Martinez on the way in. Because once Martinez gets inside his range, his power will be gone. So I'm going to disagree with the odds makers here. Right? This is the second video I'm doing on this fight. Because I believe Martinez is more front foot heavy, is more active, and is able to fight lower, and mentally is not intimidated by having to travel to Quigg's backyard to fight Scott Quigg. Because I believe Scott Quigg needs room to operate and likes to be able to go to a guy's body. Look at the second Rendell Monroe fight. Right? And because I feel Martinez, because he's shorter and can crouch, knows how to, as I say, hide his body I think this is a tough fight for Quig. The bet I've recommended is to take the underdog. We're trying to beat the casino. It's to take the underdog, Kiko Martinez, at 3-1 odds or higher. Folks, you don't even have to take him by KO to get these odds. Take Martinez at 3-1 just to win the fight. And hedge to play with Quig by KO. I'll agree, Scott Quigg to me has the kind of punching power. If he lands a couple of shots, that could be all it takes. Right? The problem, though, is understand. Martinez went 12 rounds in the Frampton rematch. Right? Even the first fight, Martinez goes 9 rounds. In other words, this is a guy with a durable chin. And as I said before, Frampton's the only guy to beat Martinez in something like the last 4 years. This is a seasoned guy. He went to Japan to beat Calzaghe. He's going to try to take the crowd out of the fight by being the more active fighter on his front foot. And he's tipped you off to the fact that he's going to try to win this fight by KO because he's told you he believes he's the stronger fighter. Let me shift gears. There were a lot of comments on the earlier video concerning Carl Froch against Joe Calzaghe. Right now, let me just say this. Forget the guys' legacies for a moment. Right? Forget the guys' resumes just for a moment. My question to Carl Froch Nation is simply, how would Carl Froch handle Joe Calzaghe's hand speed? Right? Understand, we've seen master boxers, Bernard Hopkins, in against Calzaghe, have all kind of problems with Joe Calzaghe's hand speed. Right? And Carl Froch really isn't that blessed in terms of hand speed. And we've seen Froch have problems with fast-handed guys in fights like, let's say, the Andre Durrell fight. In fact, the Jermaine Taylor fight, that's a great moment for Froch if you look at the last few rounds of the fight. It's not a great moment for Froch if you look at the first half of the fight, where Froch actually gets dropped by Jermaine Taylor. And I mean dropped, no flash knockdown, dropped. Where Froch gets dominated the first half of that fight. So, let me just say, if Froch were to fight Calzaghe, and we're just looking at styles, and I understand, Calzaghe had a reputation for being a slap boxer. Okay, fair enough. I'm just telling you that Calzaghe's throwing more than slaps because you have to ask yourself, if you're fighting an unbeaten Mikhail Kessler, if Mikhail Kessler felt that you were hitting him with feathers, why is Kessler as tentative as he is after a few rounds against Calzaghe? Calzaghe could actually sit down on punches. Right? I think Carl Froch, who had a pretty good jab, would have a problem with the fact that that jab likely wouldn't land against southpaw Calzaghe. If you're going to criticize Calzaghe here, let me ask you this. Name me the fight where Calzaghe, against a right-handed fighter, seems to have a lot of problems with his jab. If Froch can't land his jab on Calzaghe, and if Calzaghe is throwing a lot of volume and has by far the superior hand speed, right? What's Froch going to do, folks? I think Calzaghe wins that fight. More importantly, let's talk about legacy. And don't get me wrong, I have the utmost respect for Carl Froch. If you go back years here on YouTube, you're going to see I picked Froch in the United States against Jermaine Taylor, who was favored in that fight. I have the utmost respect for Froch. I know I picked Lucien Boutte against Froch. Okay, fair enough. But look at the careers of the two men. Think legacy. Understand. I know a lot of you have said, hey, Froch fought Mikhail Kessler in Kessler's backyard. He did. I agree that Kessler fought Joe Calzaghe in Joe Calzaghe's backyard. I agree with all of that. But can we agree the Froch-Kessler fight's close? Can we agree that Kessler's unbeaten when he fights Joe Calzaghe? And that fight is not that close. Joe Calzaghe wins that fight. If you consider Kessler to be one of the biggest accomplishments of Carl Froch's career, then why aren't you giving Calzaghe credit for beating an unbeaten Mikhail Kessler? Right? It looks to me that fight's fascinating, folks, because it looks to me like Calzaghe figures out unbeaten Kessler about, let's say, a third into the fight, makes the adjustments, and then dominates the latter part of the fight. Understand, one of the biggest accomplishments of Carl Froch's career is a mountain Joe Calzaghe climbed when that mountain was unbeaten. But rather than talk about opinion here, let's just talk about fact. Just fact. Carl Froch was a warrior. He fought everyone. I agree with that 100%. Right? Carl Froch took on a lot of opponents. It's hard to make an argument that Carl Froch was afraid to take on, an unbeaten George Groves, an unbeaten Andre Ward, a Glenn Johnson when Glenn Johnson was viewed as a problem. Right? A Jermaine Taylor when Jermaine Taylor was viewed as a problem. And Arthur Abraham when we didn't know who was going to win that fight. I agree with all of that. But we're talking legacies. Name me the fighter that Carl Froch beat who, after his fight against Carl Froch, went on to have the kind of remaining career that Bernard Hopkins had after losing to Joe Calzaghe. Right? Keep in mind, Calzaghe and Froch both fought Kessler. Right? We talk about guys fighting tough opponents. If you're going to pursue the tough opponent argument, then who on Carl Froch's resume went on to beat opponents the caliber of light heavyweight champion Jean Pascal, light heavyweight champion Tavares Cloud, light heavyweight champion Beibut Shumanov? Right? Understand the way legacy works in boxing. If you beat a guy, right? Lennox Lewis beats Vitaly Klitschko. And then that guy goes on to do great things. Right? Vitaly Klitschko becomes champ later and, of course, has a pretty good run at it. Right? I believe Vitaly Klitschko's a Hall of Famer. Then as we look back on your legacy, we're going to say, wow, this guy beat this young lion. And this young lion went on to rule a portion of the forest. That's going to shine the light back on you. Think about Floyd Mayweather for a second. One of the best things to ever happen to Mayweather, and it's enhanced his legacy quite a bit, is his victory over Miguel Cotto. Because Cotto, of course, goes on, wins the 154-pound title, beats Yuri Foreman, goes on, beats Sergio Martinez, is now doing damage at 160 pounds. 10 years from now, when I look at the Floyd Mayweather resume, I'm going to see the win over Cotto. Then I'm going to see what Cotto did after the fight. I'm going to realize, Cotto wasn't washed up when he fought Mayweather. Cotto had a lot left in the tank. Cotto did a lot of things after the fight. Right? Floyd is the only guy officially to beat Canelo. Now, all of y'all know that I personally feel Erislandy Lara beat Canelo. Okay, whatever. right? Sour grapes on my part. Austin Trout, I think, beat Canelo. Okay, whatever. Officially, we'll go by what's in the books, right? When I'm handicapping fights, I go by what I see, but here we'll go by what's in the books. Okay, fair enough. If Saul Alvarez goes on to have a dominant career, right? If he beats Cotto, then if he goes on to beat a bunch of other champions at middleweight, then if he gains weight and if he's, later in his career causing a lot of people a lot of problems at 168 pounds, that's going to look great. That's going to look great for Floyd Mayweather. Right? That's the way boxing works. Now you have Joe Calzaghe having beaten Miguel Kessler. Think about that. He beats Kessler. Then Kessler goes on to a lot of good things, including a victory over Carl Froch. Right? You have Joe Calzaghe beating Bernard Hopkins. Now we call it later in his career. Right? In my opinion, Bernard Hopkins is one of the most dominant fighters. He's on the Mount Rushmore of middleweight champions. Right? With a select few. I'll agree, Joe Calzaghe beats him after that middleweight career. But then the guy goes on to fight high-quality competition. I haven't even named his fight against Roy Jones. Right? He goes on to fight high-quality competition. And he holds his own. Keep in mind, it's after the Calzaghe fight that Bernard Hopkins fights an unbeaten Kelly Pavlik, who was a big favorite, and beats him. So, for all the people Carl Froch fought, go to BoxRec right now. Go ahead and look at his resume. Who's the guy that he beat, who after the fight went on to beat guys the caliber of Pavlik, Pascal, Cloud, and Shumanov? Right? Let me say this about Hopkins too. We know that one of the hardest things to do in boxing is to go the distance with Sergey Kovalev. Right? How many guys have made it through 12 rounds of boxing against Sergey Kovalev? The answer is one. Bernard Hopkins. Even his loss in a fight in which he was dominated isn't going to look that bad in the history books when you consider the fact that he was still standing at the end of 12 rounds against a home run hitter. Right? So, if you're comparing Calzaghe to Froch, understand how big that Calzaghe-Hopkins fight is for his legacy. Right? It's just like the Lennox Lewis-Vitaly Klitschko fight, where you think about Lennox Lewis, and then you say to yourself, whoa, you know what? Even on the way out the door, when Lennox Lewis was in the 9th inning of his career, the guy looked better against Vitaly Klitschko than most. Right? I know there's a crowd out there saying, hey, that fight shouldn't have been stopped. Right? There's the crowd that says, hey, even if it was going to cost Klitschko his eye, that fight should have continued. It was a title fight. And I'll agree with those who say, hey, look, Lewis is lucky that eye got cut, because Lewis was having a lot of trouble that night. But the one thing you can't take away is the fact that Lewis fought the young lion. Lewis had that battle. Lewis got his hand raised at the end of it. Lewis wasn't the guy cut up. Right? Joe Calzaghe unbeaten. There are no Andre Ward moments to his career. There's no statement where you say, apart from Andre Ward, Joe Calzaghe beat everyone he fought. And then you have to read the finer print, that says, you know what, he lost to Kessler the first time, but he beats Kessler in the rematch. With Calzaghe, there's no fine print. Joe Calzaghe retired unbeaten. Unbeaten. And then you look further, and you look at the Hopkins resume. And keep in mind, you're going to be looking at these resumes because these guys are Hall of Famers. Right? The only thing Bernard Hopkins has to do to get in the Hall of Fame is retire. Right? They don't let you in until you retire. Well, the point is this. Then you see where Calzaghe fought Hopkins. Right? The U.S. In other words, that neutralizes Calzaghe beat Kessler in his backyard argument. Well, you know what? Calzaghe went to other guys' backyards. And then as you're thinking, was Hopkins washed up? You then notice that after the fight, Hopkins beats Kelly Pavlik. That was huge, folks. Pavlik beat Jermaine Taylor twice. Then you notice that Hopkins gains weight and actually gets multiple titles in the higher weight class. Who on Froch's resume has done that? I hope you leave those comments in the comment section to this video. We can talk opinion all we want. Give me the facts. Right? Who did Carl Froch beat that went on to the kind of career Bernard Hopkins had after his fight to Joe Calzaghe? If the answer is no one, then can we come to grips with the fact that when we mention the greatness of Carl Froch and then refer to Calzaghe, can we at least agree that Calzaghe is also a historical figure? Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com. Let me sum up today's fight. I think Kiko Martinez is a live underdog. Right? Understand, by the way, the Quig by KO prop is a plus 250. The props I'm recommending are 3-1 and higher on Kiko Martinez to win. Right? You're getting huge odds. And a plus 250, right? 2.5 to 1 on Scott Quigg by KO. I'll concede I'll be in tears. I'll be in a lot of pain here if Scott Quigg in his backyard wins a decision. And of course, Quigg hasn't lost. But this is gambling. Right? That's the main part of this video. The second part of this video is simply, as we talk legacy, let's recognize that the records of the men, the quality of their fights, who the guy we're judging has beaten after that fight, matter. So what Vitaly Klitschko did after the Lennox Lewis fight matters to Lennox Lewis's legacy. What Miguel Cotto is doing now, post Mayweather, right, reflects on Mayweather's legacy. What Bernard Hopkins did after losing to Joe Calzaghe reflects on Joe Calzaghe's history. In the moment, we like the new shiny car. In the moment, we'll overinflate the present, right? We'll look at Carl Froch beating guys like George Groves, and we'll say, oh my God, Carl Froch is a great, oh my goodness, right? Does George Groves at this point belong in the conversation with Mikhail Kessler and Bernard Hopkins in terms of opponents? Let's think it through. I personally feel head-to-head Calzaghe beats Carl Froch. I feel legacy-wise Calzaghe more than holds his own. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for all of us here in the comment section to this video. If you make a video on subject matter like this, then go ahead and leave a link in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.